So here we go. I have logged into my GCP account and I have selected my first project. So when we work on the GCP console, it is important to select a project. Initially, we get one of the projects that is by default provided by the Google Cloud. But later on, we can add more projects, depends on the requirements. Obviously, we need to enable the billing for each and every project. So here I have enabled the billing for my first project, and whatever resources that I create would be created in the my first project. The Cloud Consult project that I have, if I create the resources in the second project or the Cloud Consult project, those resources that are created in the Cloud Consult project are isolated from my first project. So the projects are an important aspect in terms of selecting or working on the GCP console, and it has to be decided first in which project you are going to create the resources. You can understand that the projects are created just like tenant partitioning, and you can serve your clients or the customers. Even in your own enterprise, you can do a division of the departments with the help of the projects. So I have already selected my first project, and here I am going to work on a compute engine virtual machine. So what we need to do, we have to navigate to the services. We have to click on the navigation menu that we can find at the top left side. And when we click on it, we get a lot of services. What we need to do is, these are the pinned services that we have been, or I have been working on a regular basis. But if we want to look into, or if we want to find out a service from the sections or from the departments, or you can say that from the business functionality or the technological functionality, then we have to click on more products. So when I click on more products, I get the services related to compute. And in the compute, I get Compute Engine, Kubernetes Engine, VMware Engine likewise. In the serverless architecture, I get a lot of services like Cloud Run, Cloud Functions, App Engine, API gateways. In the storage, we get File Store, Cloud Storage, Appliance, Data Transfer. So in a nutshell, through the sections that are defined, we can select a particular service. Now what we need to work on, we need to create a virtual servers as of now. We have to create a virtual machines. And how we can do that? We have to go to the compute. And in the compute, we have a compute engine option. This is the service that offers us to create a virtual machines. And this works as an infrastructure as a service. Now what we are going to do here is, when we click on the compute engine, we have to go to the VM instances, because I'm going to create one instance. So virtual servers on the Google Cloud are called as the VM instances. What we need is, we need to create an instance. So I'll just click on the VM instances. And let's wait for the things to appear. And here you go. We get a dashboard. Now we have to click on the create instance because we are going to create a new one. And if you look into this particular dashboard, there is no instance that is running. So that means it's a complete blank dashboard. We need to add or create a new instance. So what we are going to do, we are going to click on create instance as of now. When I click on create instance, I get a lot of parameters. It's just like in the form of a template, and we need to select the things in the template. Once we specify the details in the template, the cloud, the GCP cloud knows what needs to be performed, and they create the server for us. They create a virtual machine for us. So we are not going to deploy a virtual machine or something. We are just going to select the template and the parameters that we require. And the GCP is going to do the task of creation of those virtual machines, and they are going to give us the access of it as well. So the first thing is, we need to specify the name of our virtual machine. So let's say I put something like Cloud Institute Windows Test. Now we need to select a region. Since we have discussed about the regions in the previous recordings, you can select any of the region based on the requirement. The selection of the region has a lot of criteria. It may depend on the latency. So let's say if you're going to host an application on the virtual server, so you need to find out where exactly the traffic is going to come towards your application. Are they going to, are you going to get the traffic across the globe or from a particular locations? Accordingly, you can select a geographical location or the region. That would reduce the latency and hence automatically it is going to improve the performance of an application. So let's say I select an APAC region and I select, let's say, Singapore. Now in the Singapore region, I select a zone. So I have 3 zones available. We have also discussed about the zones in the previous video. So let's say I select the zone 1A, and with this zone selection, the Google Cloud ensures that our virtual machine should be created in one of the data centers of that zone only. All right. Now the next thing is we need to select the type of a machine. The machine configurations needs to be selected. The machine configurations are what? These are the type of the servers. Now on the Google Cloud or any of the cloud platform, we don't have a privilege to decide our server or the capacity. We cannot decide the compute resources that we require. So we have to opt out the compute resources or the type of machines that we need from the family of the servers. So in the machine family, the Google Cloud offers some types of the servers that we can select, and each and every type has its own computing resources. When I say about the computing resources, that means it offers us some set of CPU resources, RAM resources, likewise. So if I'm going to launch a virtual machine for a general purpose, like just hosting a simple application, I may go with a general purpose type of a server, which is, you can say, a moderate performing servers. If I require a compute optimized servers, which should have higher compute resources, I may go with the compute optimized servers, and here you can see the series has been changed. If I require more on the memory based servers, then I can go with memory optimized servers. Likewise, if I'm planning to host any kind of a gaming application or the animation videos, then I may go with the graphical processor units. Obviously, the GPUs are a bit more expensive. Now, if you have observed here, whenever I click on any of the optimized type of a server, at the right side, you get the costing as well on a per month basis. So here you can see in the general purpose, you get pay for what you use, no upfront cost and per second billing. And there is a monthly estimate as well. You even get an hourly estimate. If I go with the GPU instance, you will see the price difference. You're going to find that it is a bit more expensive. So here you can see we get a monthly estimate of $220. Now it's not necessary that I have to go with the series of the server that has been reflected here in the tab. I can choose out of it. So there are a lot of different type of series of servers I can select. I can select an N1 standard, N1 standard 2, N1 standard 4. So this gives me a different compute resources as well as the RAM memory. So according to your application, according to your software that you're going to deploy, you have to select the compute resources. So we are fine with the general purpose as of now because we just want to do the testing of our applications and the connectivity of our virtual machines. So I'll go with the general purpose E2 series, and in the general purpose we have a second generation servers, out of which we have an E2 series servers, N2, N2D, T2A, T2D, and also we have a first generation servers. I would advise that if you're going to work in the lab environment just for the testing purpose, you should go with the E2 series servers. And in the E2 series servers, you can further select either the E2.micro, E2.small, or E2.medium likewise. And I would suggest that in the E2 series servers, you can go with E2.micro, and that would minimize the costing as much as possible. It offers 2 CPUs and 1 GB of RAM, and here you can see it just asks us for $8 per month, and we get $300 credit from the Google Cloud as well, so we can leverage that much cost. This type of a machine is sufficient for us to do the lab work and the testing. Now the next thing is we need to select the hard disk, the virtual hard disk. Guys, when we work on the instances, when we create a virtual machine, definitely we have selected the type of a server which offers the CPU and the RAM, but where exactly our operating system is going to store? Where exactly our data is going to be stored? So we require a storage as well. Just imagine you're going to uh, you're working on a laptop or a desktop. So what do you have in the laptop? You have a CPU, you have a RAM, and then you have a hard disk. So hard disk is required to store your files and the operating system files. So similarly, the virtual machines are also just like a virtual computers. So they also require a storage, a virtual hard disk. So how we can provide that? This is provided with a persistent disk, and here these elastic disks or the elastic storages, we have to attach it to our instances. We can reserve a capacity of it. So here you can see by default it is giving us 10 GB of capacity, which will be attached to our instance. But in case if you require more capacity, you can change it, and you can change it later on also when the instance or the virtual server is running. So that is sufficient for us. And in the boot disk, after the size 10 GB, we get an image. This image we are getting is Debian Linux 11. So the image is of an operating system. Guys, we cannot have an operating system in the form of an OVA, OVF, or an ISO files format like we use in the on-prem or the data centers. Hence, since we are working on the Google Cloud platform, so we get the software images or the operating system images in the form of Google Cloud image only. If I need to change the operating system, let's say this virtual server, I'm creating it for the Windows operating system. So what I need is I just have to click on change, and instead of a Debian operating system, I'll try to have a Windows operating system. So I'll click on the Windows server. And these are the list of the operating systems that by default Google Cloud provides, and we can select it. In case if you want to bring our own operating system images, we have to convert it into form of a custom images, and we can find it here. We can even take the snapshots of our existing instance also that can be used as a backup, and from the snapshots we can restore or create a new instance as well. Now, how these disk works, these are all the block storage disk. And for example, let's say this is our virtual machine, the VM, and it has a compute capacity of, let's say we are using an E2.micro type of an instance that offers somewhere around 2 CPUs and around close to 1 GB RAM. Now this is basically the computing resources, but it requires a storage as well. So here we require a block storage. So let's say this is our boot disk having a capacity of around 50 GB. Now what we need to do is we need to attach this disk with our instance. Why? Because if we are going to install a Windows operating system, then the Windows operating system files or any files that we are going to store, that will be stored on this disk. And this is elastic by nature. So these disks are always elastic, which means that we can make the changes. We can increase the capacities of this disk anytime. And guys, it is not necessary that we have to go with one disk only with a virtual machine. I can have multiple persistent disks attached to my virtual machines, and accordingly, from the operating system perspective, we can do the partitions. However, you have to remember that one persistent disk can be attached to a one virtual machine. It cannot be shared with multiple virtual machines. These are block storages, hence it has to be attached to a single virtual machine. So that's the concept of the bootable disk. Now, when we move forward, we understand the concept of firewalls. So firewalls, why the firewalls are required? And they are important to understand. Firewalls provides the security to our virtual machines. And how? Let's look into it. So for example, now why do we require the firewall rules? And let's try to understand that. For example, let's say we have one virtual machine, the VM, with E2.micro capacity, right? And obviously, we would be running an operating system on this VM. Now, when we try to connect to this instance, since this instance is running on the cloud, let's say this is a Google Cloud Platform, the GCP, and it's on a different network altogether. So we would be connecting to the virtual machine from the internet, from the public network. Now, to make the cloud resources secure, the firewall rules plays an important role. If the cloud provider does not give you a firewall rule, then there could be a security lapses. Anyone can connect to your VM from the public network. So what happens is the firewall rules are attached to the virtual machine, and on the firewall rules you specify the ports. You open up the ports for the inbound traffic. Let's say this is a Windows virtual machine that we are running, and if I need to connect to this virtual machine from the internet, then we need to open up the RDP port on the firewall for the source IPs. That means for the IPs from where the connectivity is going to be established. Now, if the RDP ports on the firewall rules are opened, then from the internet we can connect to the virtual machine. Otherwise, we'll not be able to do that. So some of the firewall ports are by default open in the virtual machine. Some ports we need to open it up, and that is something which we'll look into in another section when we'll plan to launch a web server on the virtual machine. So let's go back to the console, and we are back to the GCP. And here what we'll do, we'll just allow a default access as of now, and from the firewall perspective, we'll not open up any port. Click on create, and you would find that the GCP will try to launch a virtual machine for us with the name Cloud Institute Windows Test. It has been launched in Asia Southeast 1A, and once the virtual machine is launched, we get two IP addresses. One is the external IP, this is the public IP. Through this IP, we need to connect to the virtual machine, and this is an internal private IP that belongs to internal GCP network. Along with that, on this virtual machine, we'll have the necessary specific Windows operating system that we have selected. So let's wait for a few minutes till the machine is ready. We'll try to connect to this virtual machine with the help of an RDP. So here you can see I have opened up the RDP client on my machine, and I'll just show you how you can open up the RDP client. So you just have to search, you have to go to the search tab of your Windows host machine, type RDP, and the remote desktop connection opens in front of you. As I mentioned previously, that in those who are using a different operating system like Linux or Mac OS, they can download the RDP file and try to open it up from their systems. Now, in the computer field, we just have to copy paste the public IP of our instance, click on connect, and here you would find that it will ask us for the username and the password. So where exactly we can get the username and the password for our machine? Let's look into it. We have to click on the RDP connect, and there will be an option to set the Windows password. Click on set Windows password, and the username by default is given by the GCP. And generally the usernames are given by your user credentials. So here you can see this is my user credentials, and I would be putting up it as a username. And then we have to click on set to generate a password. So we'll click on set and let's wait for the password to appear in front of us. Here you go. We got the password, copy paste it and copy to the clipboard and paste it in the password section of the RDP client. Click on OK and now we should be able to connect to our Windows virtual machine. Let's wait for the Windows console to open. So here you can see it's trying to open up the Windows. It's uploading the user profile service, and quickly we'll find the Windows logo and the necessary drives and the documents that would be available in front of us. So here you go. We have logged in successfully to our Windows instance. And if you want to see the drive, you can just look into the C drive. And there you can find the capacity, the virtual hard drive that or the persistent disk that we have attached to our instance. Now it's your Windows understanding that you need to work on. How do you want to work on it? Whether you want to create a database over it, whether you want to host an applications, it is up to you. So if I go to this PC and look for the C drive capacity, so I get somewhere around 49.8 GB. So remember when I tried to create the virtual machine, when we created this virtual machine, at that time we assigned a persistent disk of 50 GB, and that's what this 49.8 GB is coming from, out of which 29.7 GB is free. The rest of it has been consumed by Windows and its corresponding files. Now we are going to see how we can launch a Linux instance. So what we need to do, the procedure is going to be the same, just that the connectivity is a bit different, because the Linux instances works on the shell, and we need to have an SSH port number 22 open, and we need to connect it using the secure shell. So there are multiple ways we can connect to the Linux instance. We can use a client application, just like we used an RDP client application to connect to the Windows instance. Similarly, I can use any other client application like PuTTY or MobiXterm to connect to the Linux instance as well. And then there are other ways like Web Connect and all. Let's look into it. So what I'll do, I'll just click on create instance, and now we are going to create a Linux one. Put a name to it. Let's say I put something like Cloud Institute Linux Test. I can go with a US Central 1, zone US Central 1A, that's fine. And here I am going to select e2.micro. So these concepts by now we know. I can go with Debian Linux, that's fine. So we'll just keep it as it is. From the Linux perspective, we have a lot of different vendors that provide us the Linux operating system. Debian is there, CentOS is there, Red Hat is there. So we can select any of it as per the requirement. And the rest of the things we'll keep it as default. Click on create. And now you would find that the GCP, the Google Cloud Platform, would try to create a Linux instance for us. Guys, creation of an instance should be very quick, and you should practice it multiple times. And once you practice it multiple times, then you will be familiar with the process and you will be able to launch the instances very quickly. So there is an error, and I believe there is an error due to the US Central 1. We were facing some issues with that region earlier. So I'll try to launch the same instance again, but in a different region and the zone. So let's look into it. Cloud Institute Linux Test 1, and instead of US Central 1, I'll select Delhi. Zone I would select 2A, e2.micro, and we'll go with the Debian Linux only. The rest of the things will keep the same. Let's click on create. So Linux being a lighter operating system, quickly we can get the access of the virtual machine as well, and it requires less storage as well. So let's wait for a minute's time till we get our instance ready, and we'll see how we can connect to it. Alright, so now we have the Linux instance created, and let's see how we can connect to it. Again, we have to just click on the SSH navigation, and there are multiple ways to connect to this instance. One of the most easiest ways, just click on open in browser window, and you would see that automatically a new window will pop up, and it will try to open up a shell connection to that instance. Let's wait for it. So this is going to happen quickly, in few seconds or minutes only. You'll find that we'll be able to connect to this instance. There are no authentications that are required, no password needs to be generated. The reason is because it's a web connect. We have already logged in into our account, so the authentication has already been done. Hence, we can directly connect to the instance. So here you can see that I have connected to the Linux instance with the name Cloud Institute Linux Test 1. That's the one that we have created here. So that's it from this video, guys, and in the next video I would be talking about how we can host a web application. We'll try to host an HTTP web server on one of the Linux instance, and then we are going to look into some concepts related to snapshots as well as the load balancer and the auto scaling features of the Compute Engine. So watch out for more videos. Bye. Take care.